This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman.
This is Lauren Lester, the voice of Robin and Nightwing.
And you're listening to the DCAU Review.
Hosted by Cal and Liam.
Streaming at DCAUreview.com.
And on your favorite podcast app.
Gotham City is out of control.
An entire city screaming in fear.
Supervillains walk the streets, preying on the innocent.
They will learn the true nature of power.
The police are powerless. A creature prowls this urban wasteland.
What is that?
He moves in darkness. For some, he is a rumor. A name whispered in the corridors of the underworld, waiting for the chance to strike. Let every criminal know the acid taste of fear.
You crazy! Bat! Giant bat!
Gotham has forgotten what justice means. The Dark Knight is here to remind them. Batman. Good guys wear black.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 287 of the DCAU Review. I'm one of your hosts, Cal, and with me, my good friend, good brother, the man that runs our social media accounts. It's Liam. Liam, welcome to another edition of the podcast, and this one we are continuing here in our month of Batman the Animated Series reviews. Really a lot of episodes that we are quite familiar with here as we wind down the original run of Batman the Animated Series episodes. And today is a unique episode, to say the least, for a number of reasons.
We have a lot to talk about with this week's episode, Showdown.
That is right, Liam. Episode Showdown. We will get into our review of this episode in just a few minutes. This episode originally debuted here in the States on Fox Kids block of programming September the 12th, 1995. Which means we just celebrated the 28-year anniversary of this episode's original airing. And of course, we will get our official IMDb synopsis for this week's episode, which is brought to you by, as it always is, by The Pod Tower. Head over to youtube.com/The Pod Tower today if you are a fan of DC podcasts, DC animation, or a combination of the both. We have quite the channel for you with the Pod Tower. It features the entire library of the Tim Talk podcast, which covered every episode of the DCAU from start to finish. It also features our friends at Watchtower Databases podcast, Jump on the Batwagon, and it also features our entire library there in one convenient channel for your listening enjoyment. Head over to youtube.com/The Pod Tower and subscribe today.
That's right. So this is the synopsis for Showdown, which has a story by Bruce Timm, Paul Dini, and friend of the show, Kevin Altieri, also directed by Kevin Altieri, teleplay by Joe Lansdale, I should mention. Music by Todd Haven, and animation by Dong Yang. And that synopsis reads as such. While the dynamic duo race to stop Ra's al Ghul from performing a kidnapping, the Wild West story of how he was once opposed by the disfigured bounty hunter Jonah Hex is told.
Well, the kidnapping sort of already happens while they're listening to the tale. It's already happened. So it's not like they're racing to stop. I mean, they're kind of racing to stop them from absconding with the person that they kidnapped. But the kidnapping is
from catching their flight is what's actually happening. But as we mentioned, friend of the show, Kevin Alti, we are putting it in here, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's right. We'll have a little bit of corrections to make once we get to our plot breakdown. But first, as you already know, if you've read the title of this episode when you click play on it, we have a special guest correspondent this week, Cal. As mentioned, a good friend of the show, Kevin Altieri. Not only does he get a director credit and a storyboard artist credit on this episode, but he's also credited as a writer on this episode. And while he's not able to join us for the full episode, we got to pick his brain on very short notice, Kevin was nice enough to make some time and chat about an episode that, as you'll hear, he is quite proud of. And so I think without any further ado, let's throw it to ourselves in the past and our good friend and special correspondent, Kevin Altieri.
All right, everybody. So a very special surprise guest. I feel like, Liam, we shouldn't even call him a guest anymore because he's on the show so often. He's one of our best friends of this show. Director and writer credit. He gets dual credit for this episode that we're reviewing this week. It is Mr. Kevin Altieri himself. Kevin, welcome back. We're going to get you your own seat on the podcast. We're just going to say, hey, whenever you want to show up, feel free to chime in because we always love having you on. And you know, when we looked ahead at this episode, this is one of those episodes when I don't think we appreciated when we were growing up because, you know, you're watching a Batman cartoon and you're like, who is Jonah Hex? We didn't, you know, when you're little kids, you don't know who Jonah Hex is and the lore of the DC behind him. But now as we've grown up and we're watching these through a critical lens and trying to analyze them, man, this is one of those episodes that stands out as a very unique part of this original Batman run. And we wanted to have your thoughts because not only does it have Ra's al Ghul, who we've had you on talking about before, and we know is a near and dear character to your heart, but we know obviously you're writer director for this episode, and we really wanted to peel back some of the layers and figure out how this episode came about. How in the world, in a run of Batman the Animated Series and now the network mandated Adventures of Batman and Robin run, did you manage to fit in a 22-minute episode featuring very little Batman?
You did a Clint Eastwood Western in the middle of our Batman show. How'd we pull that?
Actually, it's it's the Wild Wild West.
We grew up watching the Wild Wild West reruns, so I'm so excited to hear you get it.
The reruns, not the stupid movie.
No, not the stupid movie. We're talking about Robert Conrad in the original Wild Wild West and with the old steampunk, these crazy. So tell us a little about, before we get ahead, designs and all that stuff. What do you remember about how this episode came together and like the pitch and all of that stuff?
Well, it wasn't really it was kind of a pitch between Bruce and Paul to me. Mm-hmm. It was, I'm trying to think, I think that it was after the recording for Harley's Holiday, where, you know, I think that was the show, but it was with Paul. Mm-hmm. Either that or no, it wasn't Deep Freeze because Deep Freeze was after. Mm. Anyway, but I think it was Harley's Holiday. But anyway, me, Bruce, and Paul are there at the recording studio, and we often would all pile in the car and just drive over there together. Mm-hmm. And so Paul and Bruce go to me and go, Kevin, what? Because when I went to visit DC Comics in New York back in the day, I had just done, in between the seasons, I had just done an issue of the Demon. So people were very surprised, like, well, if you had your choice, why didn't you do Batman? And I'm like, well, you know, I love the Demon. You know, right. I always I just wanted to draw the Demon. I like drawing chainmail. I don't know. It's like I like the more different comics. Like I'm a huge fan, you know, of the war comics, especially in the 70s. You know, Russ Heath, you know, Alex Toth, you know, all the stuff that's outside the box.
Right.
Anyway, in the DC universe.
Yep.
Anyway, so Paul and Bruce go, you know, okay, Kevin, what character would you want to do in the Batman show? Who would you want to bring in? Mm-hmm. You know, and I said, well, you know, Sergeant Rock. I'd like to do Sergeant Rock, or God, Enemy Ace. How would you get Enemy Ace? You know, Neil Adams did that Enemy Ace story, but it really isn't Enemy Ace. It's like a guy, a descendant of his. It's not actually Hans von Hammer and stuff like that. And I said, and I went and said, you know, and then I went and said Jonah Hex or Jonah Hex. I'd love to do Jonah Hex. I don't know how we're going to work that in. And then we started going, but if Ra's al Ghul is involved, wait a minute. Yeah, this could be a story back then. And, you know, and we just have to figure out how to, you know, so we sat there and I was saying, yeah, and Ra's al Ghul is doing the Master of the World thing, you know, the Jules Verne thing. where he's going to take over America because the railroad is screwing up the West. And so he's going to, he makes an airship, like master of the world. And then he's going to just bomb the hell out of the railroad all the way to Washington, D.C. and take it over. And they're like, wait, yeah. And Paul's like, yeah, wait, we can. So we're like hammering, throwing out. And that's where the plot came from, the story.
That's awesome. I love the idea that you're just like throwing ideas out there. You start with like, yeah, and then wait a minute, we can put this together. And then, I mean, that's a lot of that is what we ended up with. Like that's the tremendous part.
And the plot fell into place. And then because one of the things, Bruce was one of the very few people I know that was like a George MacDonald Fraser fan. I don't know if you're familiar with George MacDonald Fraser, but he wrote the Flashman books.
Okay.
And Royal Flash was after the 3 and 4 Musketeers, Royal Flash, starring Malcolm McDowell as Flashman, with Oliver Reed, with like, swordsman, fantastic. It's a bit more of a comedy, but I love it. And Malcolm McDowell was a great Flashman. But Bruce and I were fans of the books, and we would talk about it quite often. And that's where, but I don't know who said it first, but it was either me or Bruce. It could have been either of us, but we both agreed. And we went, and Flashman is his son, because Flashman is a son of a scoundrel, in the books. He's such a son of a bitch, but it's like, but it's the same time period, like Flashman, so again, that fit in. And from that moment, we were thinking of nothing but Malcolm McDowell for that role, because he had played Flashman, and he could play. He could. It's just you hardly had that. You didn't have to give him any direction. Yeah, and I don't think he had done any animation up to that point.
Well, I know this is definitely his first role with this particular universe, with Andrea Romano as his voice director. Of course, he would later be Metallo and a few other things in later shows. But yeah, this is. I think this is very early on in his career, and it is something where I think we've talked about that, how the actors who have a great deal of stage experience seem to translate very well to the voice acting as well. And it's just, it feels like he just picked it up immediately and was.
But of course, the thing about Malcolm McDowell is like, can he do narration? Can he do voiceover? All you gotta do is watch Clockwork Orange, because he's the narrator. And just he had such a rich voice.
Absolutely.
But different than David Warner.
I was going to say, but you pair those two together.
And just watching them sitting next to each other and talking, you've grown rather bold, Arcady, flogging my men.
I think that adds to the end when you have the final twist that this is his son. It's like, wow, these two dynamic voices, because David Warner's is so much more calm, it's direct, it is sinister, but it's very understated. Whereas Malcolm McDowell is clearly over the top and animated in the way that he
more of a peacock.
Absolutely dynamic in the way that he's so that in some ways I feel like adds to that twist is, holy cow, this guy is actually Ra's al Ghul's son. That you didn't see that twist coming, and that's why this whole story happens to begin with. So.
And I think, in my opinion, I think Arcady Duvall is one of Bruce's best character designs.
Incredible.
Because it's him doing Flashman out of the book. Like, this is, if we're going to do a Flashman cartoon, this is what he would look like.
I love that. That's tremendous. So you mentioned, I assume you were pretty familiar. You grew up reading Jonah Hex comics, like back in the day. That was something you were pretty familiar with the character. I read someplace there was a direction to kind of change a little bit of his characterization. Did you feel like that worked better for not making him like the straight up Confederate soldier, and having a bit of different motivation?
Well, he is a bounty hunter. And they allude to it when he first shows up in the town. You allude to it. But you allude to him being a bounty hunter. Don't say death. Now, and just to go back a little bit, because like almost immediately after that we met, and before the script even happened, because Joe Lansdale and when you guys were kids, the reason that you weren't reading Jonah Hex was because it was very adult at this point.
Right.
It's like DC started doing more adult, and Jonah Hex was a real bounty hunter,
Right.
And Joe Lansdale was, I think, writing at the time.
Okay.
So Paul Dini said, I can get Joe Lansdale. But before the script even was happening, I come back and there's Joe Denton, who was doing, I think he was a background guy. I'm not quite sure, but he was certainly capable of doing props. And he was someone who could really ink. He was like a guy who inks. But Joe, he was older than most of us there, he was older than me, and I think I was older than most everyone else anyhow. But Joe, I went up to Joe because Joe would go off for weekends for entertainment, and he'd go to Arizona, and he'd come back and he'd say, "Hey, Kevin, this is me like last weekend," and it's like he was in Tombstone, Arizona, and there he is, 6 guns, bandolier.
Oh my gosh!
Or then he would go and he would do like Civil War reenactments, which they had a bunch of them in California.
Wow.
So he was like a real cowboy aficionado, and he was like as interested in history as me. So I go to Joe, and it's like, "Hey Joe, what do you think of this idea?" And he's like, "Oh man." And before you know it, he's done all these props. Colt Dragoons, I said, no. Jonah Hex comes from the Civil War. It's outlaw Josie Wales. That's the period. He's outlaw Josie Wales. He's got the 6 shooters but they're the Colt Dragoons, black powder Colt Dragoons. And Joe just did the models, that and all the props. That usually wasn't his job. Wow. And then between the two of us, I was saying, okay, so we're really going to try and figure out how would you make an airship that actually functions?
Right.
But it's got to be able to take damage. So it's got to be an ironclad. So it's like that Civil War technology.
Yep.
And, hence, okay, so it's like a cross between the CSS Virginia and the Monitor. So it's got the Monitor, but it's got like the CSS Virginia kind of hull. So fire broadsides, and it's got a gun deck in it and turrets, and and then we tried to make it work with one gas bag, but then we're like, no, it's a structure going up and twin boom, and all of a sudden it started the Phoenix started to take shape.
So cool. Yeah. The designs and some of we mentioned Wild Wild West at the top of the show, but like so much of that show incorporated sort of that, what is now known as the steampunk stuff, with like taking modern technology, but retroactively, how would this technology have looked or fit in that era? And looking through all of this, we were just commenting like, oh, that would be right you would see Jim West absolutely going up against Dr. Lovelace in an episode with one of those things. Like that was right up. I mean, some of the designs, guns, all that stuff. So fun.
Steampunk didn't exist yet.
Right.
So we went, okay, perhaps, Joe and I were like working out the idea of the concepts and saying, okay, it's like you got the main gun decks and stuff. And we really based all of that on Civil War technology, American Civil War.
Right.
So we based that on that. But it still is, he's saying, but looking forward, Victorian era, it's like a little bit of like World War I era technology. That's how advanced he would be at that time.
Right.
Would be at that time. He's a step past everyone else.
Always. Absolutely.
Hence the Gatling, the pervasive Gatling guns.
I was going to say that was another one.
The
hand crank Gatling gun was a huge, got a big smile out of both of us for that one.
Yeah, and BS&P was. I don't even think they knew what to think about this.
I would say there's guns going off, there's bombs going off, there's people getting punched in the face, albeit strategically.
Well, there is. And by the way, if anyone notice on my episodes, Robin, at the very beginning, it's the only ball punch you'll ever see, like in any of the Batman shows. It's quite a blatant one. It's quite a blatant one.
I love the shot of the guy and his eyes get so expressive once you cut away from the punch, and his eyes, like, immediately what happened. Like, there's no guessing there. But it's funny. When we've had you on before and you've mentioned how dirty Robin fights, I leaned over to Liam as soon as we saw that. I was like, there's Kevin's mandate of Robin being a dirty fighter right there, right to the balls.
It's like, and the fight's over.
Right?
Mm-hmm. The guy's probably better off. Because all he got was a ball punch. He didn't really get, knocked out or
anything. Exactly. Right. He's just a little punched over. That's right. Exactly.
So our other question about the story was kind of, so once you decide you're going to work on this episode, is there any resistance do you hear about from the network about, hey, we're doing an episode that doesn't really focus on
think they were just shocked.
Uh-huh.
Sorry to cut you off like that.
Oh, no problem.
But it's like, I think they were just shocked. I think they were just, what? Because it's like, and it's like I insisted, like I did in the storyboard, I actually animated the cannonballs and I put it in the timing, the speed of the cannonball, so you can kind of see them. And Bruce is like, are you insane? You can't see cannonballs. And I'm like, actually, you can see cannonballs. It's like, have you ever seen old school, like Napoleon or Parrott guns firing? Mm-hmm. I have. Mm. You can see that cannonball. If you're looking for it, you'll see it. Wow. So it's like bullets are a little smaller, but cannonballs are big enough that you can actually see them.
Right. You think about the size of these things.
And and Don Yang, the studio, that whoever got this is like, it was. I recognize certain animators. Mm-hmm. And whoever got this, it was like one of those TMS satellite studios. Mm. They were probably based in Korea. I'm not sure. It's like it's Yang. But man, this one, like the tail end of the sword fight, saber versus Bowie knife at the end. Man, I could not ask for better. It's got squash and stretch and the character. It's like. And I don't even care if they're not on model. It doesn't matter.
The action is from that like middle portion. Once the Phoenix gets off the ground, it's like nonstop action for the next 10 minutes or whatever it is for that third act.
And you guys totally screwed up on the credits at the beginning.
What did we mess up?
Storyboards.
Oh, we missed the storyboard credit. Oh my goodness.
No, I mean, I storyboarded like once the Phoenix is flying, it's all that's storyboard wise with Joe Den and Glenn Murakami,
But still, that whole sequence is phenomenal. Like
it's just like a dream come true for me to get to do that. And it's like, of all the episodes, I'm perhaps proudest of this one.
Wow,
just because it's just so off the normal track.
Yes,
I mean, you never saw anything like this.
Exactly. Like you just said, like having to think of a vehicle. How would an airship look that's a little futuristic for the time, but not impossible for the time, and that sort of thing, and designing all of that from the ground up. Yeah, of course, I can see why that one. Yeah, I just love how even though you wouldn't necessarily, I think of Jonah Hex as like a swashbuckler in this episode. That whole last sequence where he's swinging on the rope and swinging around, he's got has a sword duel at the end. Like it takes on this almost pirate adventure feel in that last act, even though there's all the explosions and guns and fire going on.
Yeah, and then people are saying you couldn't fight like a saber with a Bowie knife, and I'm like, it was done.
Yeah,
it was done.
Quite often. Figure it out, right?
Yeah, it's like, no, the Civil War, the American Civil War happened all the time.
There you go.
Bowie knife basically
just have to have the knowledge to know that it happened, right?
But and also, it's like, if you go and say that, it's like, well, Jonah Hex certainly could fight a saber with a Bowie knife.
I was going to say this is not the first time he's probably done that.
I was going to say you also went with, you didn't go with the younger incarnation of Jonah Hex in this episode. He's clearly it's the tail end of his run. It's established many times. He's done this for a long time. You even get the Lethal Weapon line at the end. I'm getting too old for this. Like you get that thrown in there. So it's established he's been around a while.
In Bruce's design, where he just decided to make him completely bald. Just got a long hair fringe. And you don't see it until they hoist him up by his ankles and the hat comes off.
Yep, absolutely. Speaking of designs, I mean, we touched on it briefly already, but how fun. We've talked to you before, we've had you on, and we know that you have such a passion for aviation, specifically trying to fit in as many different designs as you can. Specifically, we talked about it on the Blind as a Bat, or not Blind as a Bat, the Off Balance episode with getting the different planes and stuff in for Ra's al Ghul. Besides, obviously, our main event here, which was an incredible design, but there's a couple of other planes it seems like you may have worked in there also, and even Ra's al Ghul gets his own like little foot-powered glider.
Well, it's just a glider. It's just a glider. But it's based on Otto Lilienthal, I think is how you pronounce his name. But I looked at like Otto Lilienthal, and I just thought, well, what would you make?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That whole deck was just an invention by me. That hangar, and then how it would work. It's like I enjoyed you'd have guys hauling on chains and and he hands off his hat. It's all gonna blow up.
Right.
Hat. I want anything to happen to this, because it's just gonna get blown off my head once I take off.
So fun.
And the Leonardo da Vinci parachutes.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Absolutely. Yeah, I was going to say, I would throughout this whole episode, it's like now that we've talked to you several times, I'm like, we can see your fingerprints throughout the episode very clearly as like, okay, we know how much Kevin has a passion for this stuff. So I bet you he took meticulous time to make sure that this one design went in there, worked right, flew right in the animation. Like it was super, super neat to see that stuff. And there's a lot of it in this particular episode for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's, yeah, it's like that one wasn't hard to figure out.
We read, I think, in an interview that you'd given in the past that, and you actually mentioned before we started recording that there was a lot of stuff cut from this episode. Was there anything you previewed, showed us one little sequence of a storyboard before we started recording? But was there anything that you wish had been able to be included that was either cut for S&P or that would have, that you really were like, I can't believe I got to lose this piece?
Well, it's like the weird thing is like this was originally going to be just like the evening time slot, but it got put on Saturday morning, and Saturday morning there was like 30 seconds difference. I think could have been a minute because there's just more on Saturday morning at the time. There was just an extra commercial or whatever.
Gotcha.
A break. So even though things were cut out of the script that I really would have liked to have had, and this one had to have been a BS&P, but in the original Jill Lansdale script, Owen Hex gets put into his cell. He's captured by Ra's al Ghul, and Ra's al Ghul goes and says, well, lock him up, and anyway, okay, so the guard closes the gate. This was cut out totally. It's like he just gets put into a cell. But guard slams the gate and goes, "Sweet dreams, Hex." And Jonah Hex goes, "Don't mind if I'll be dreaming about your mother, do you?" That got cut. I don't know why that would have got cut.
Yeah, come on. A kid wouldn't have known what that meant. That's too funny.
So that got cut, but there was things like, well, we had Patrick Leahy, and it's like this, and everything kind of fit in the edit before. It's like we had, our Senator Patrick Leahy. It's like the only problem is, and Andrea got him to play the governor.
Mm-hmm.
And Patrick Leahy spoke and did his delivery like, and it's not a big speech, but he spoke like he was actually giving a speech.
Right.
So it's kind of long.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh no, it's like, if I got to cut something, I'm going to cut some of the speech. And then I checked, and Andrea said, you can't.
Mm-hmm.
Why? That's the deal. If we get a public servant like Patrick Leahy, and he's a great supporter of animation, huge supporter of animation. So if you get his voice, you can't cut any of it. It was just like, that was just kind of the contractual deal.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to get a senator or a governor who will do a voice, that's kind of what the deal was.
Interesting.
So I had to keep him in. And if you notice the scene where he's giving the speech, I have the crowd. I storyboarded this myself. I have the crowd, but to keep the scene alive, I have that kid.
I was going to say that kid jumping up and down. Yep.
Trying to see it. And then when he finishes his speech, it's like he doesn't even get to see anything.
Right.
Which also brings, like, this is also another thing. This is, in this particular episode, like, character designers, other than Bruce, came in, because there's so many characters. There's so many extra characters. And you couldn't, and this episode especially, you could not go and just pull from another episode, which many
wouldn't match.
would do. It's not going to happen. Although we did pull the horses by Chen Yi Chang.
Interesting.
The horses came from Avatar.
Okay.
So we were able to reuse those horses. Yeah. I think all we had to do was change out the saddles and stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, Chen Yi, Mike Diedrich, Dexter Smith, they really added all those Western characters.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
That really kept it alive. And it has, the result was, it really has a bit of a different look.
Mm-hmm. It really does, yeah. I mean, that's what makes this episode so unique. It's let alone just the time and the setting of the episode itself, but all the characters are 100% unique.
That opening scene when we first meet Jonah and he's in the saloon and everybody's kind of giving him the once over, and then everyone sees the side of his face, and everyone sort of instantly recoils. I love that. Like, it's such a nice little bit of just showing, telling.
That was Mike Gogan. I gave him all the stuff in the town.
So fun.
And I got to meet, in this one, just going back to like the actors and stuff. Mm-hmm. And speaking of Jonah Hex, Jonah Hex, and I always thought of Jonah Hex when I first went to go to the movies and I saw The Outlaw Josie Wales.
Mm-hmm.
Man, it's like I thought this is like Clint Eastwood doing Jonah Hex. Because once he gets hit on the face, gets the scar by Bill McKinney. So I was always a fan of Bill McKinney's, just from that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, everyone goes and says, who did the voice of Jonah Hex? And I said, Bill McKinney, the guy from Deliverance. I'm like, why do you focus on that? It's like he didn't get the job because he could do like an ornery hillbilly.
Right.
He got the job because of Outlaw Josie Wales. He's such a great Western voice.
Well, it's funny. I think the one Batman the Animated Series wiki page is like, oh, he's most famous for his role in Deliverance. So on his actual Wikipedia page, though, we went and looked it up and we're like, holy cow, this guy was in 7 or 8 other Western films. He worked with Clint Eastwood before, most notably in this Josie Wales movie. Like, that should be the headline, because so many, we've talked about it with you before and on our show, anytime that it seemed that Andrea could get somebody that fit with the theme of the episode or was familiar with that type of characterization, it just fit for the show. So why would you not get somebody that had worked with Clint Eastwood before in a very similar characterization like this?
Yeah, and also he worked with John Wayne. He was in the Shootings. It's like so. Anyway, you get it,
right? Absolutely.
Set that record straight. We didn't get him because he, tackled Ned Beatty.
That's right. exactly.
That wasn't the one that got him the job.
That's awesome.
And I got to meet Elizabeth Montgomery.
I was going to say this was, I believe this is her final acting role before she passed.
Yeah, which
just an institution, like another incredible. It's wild they agreed to do it, right? Like you pinch yourself when you meet someone like that, I'm sure.
And the weird thing is like she, you meet her and it's like she had to have been sick. She had to have been, but it's like I just looked at her and it's like, man, she's just as pretty as she was in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, just such a timeless, beautiful lady.
Mm-hmm.
And she totally, I mean, she's playing the madame, which, he hurt one of my girls real bad. And, we know what her job was.
Right. Yes.
But she just played it it's just like a subtle, and and the fact it's like that accent that she uses,
mm-hmm.
kind of a touch of a Southern lady,
mm-hmm.
Anyway, just like, and the sympathy between her and Hex,
mm-hmm.
Just such a good job.
Absolutely. I say, and that kind of informs that interaction between them sort of informs Jonah Hex being so determined to grab, him at the end of the episode. Is like, no, it's not because I'm defending the good old US of A. It's because you're a bad man and I catch bad men. Like that's what it comes down to at the end.
Yeah. And then going back to like what has to be cut, there's certain things that just had to stay in, but there was stuff at the beginning where he's coming into the town.
Mm-hmm.
There was more reaction of people, and there was several of those shots that were animated, and I just wanted to keep, and just because there's Bruce had like hick on a pickle barrel. And there's like this guy just chomping on a pickle, eating a pickle, and he's like, "Whoa!" That got cut. There's just subtle things, with dogs running away from him,
mm-hmm.
and once they see him, and
right,
just all these things leading up to his final reveal
mm-hmm.
that were cut, which really bugged me. But had to be done. And then there's the final cut that I just we get the thing that this is like a minute shorter. Actually, I do remember it was a minute because a minute was like a stab to the heart.
Ugh.
So I'm sitting there with Joe Gall, and we're editing, and this is on, so it's actually cut and splice.
Mm-hmm.
And we're just trying to get it down to time without losing too much, because I'm not going to lose the broadside with the cannonballs flying at camera.
Right.
I'm not going to lose like the combat at the end, it's like with all the guys like firing. And you'll notice we don't show anyone getting hit.
Yes.
Damage being done. It's like buildings are blowing up, and
mm-hmm.
And you see the Gatling gun hits going up to the soldiers, and then we cut.
Yes.
Right.
So so that's all for BS&P, and that was all great, but I'm not losing the Gatling guns and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not losing I'm not losing that sword fight. But I did it's like I showed you guys earlier, there's the one shot where it's like where Duval is sent by, and there was actually more dialogue in there, in the bridge of
mm-hmm.
the Phoenix of the ship.
Mm-hmm.
Where Jonah, where Jonah Hex is, all hell has broken loose.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's like, so where Ra's al Ghul tells Arcady Duval, trying to remember exactly how the whole scene went,
mm-hmm.
but there's an altercation where it's like, now he's really pissed off at his kid.
Mm-hmm.
He's pissed off. And he like reprimands him in front of the whole bridge. And then there's this guy that Arcady goes, is like, go and handle this problem. And Arcady goes and walks out, and he's looking back over his shoulder. and then he sees this guy who's kind of smirking at him, who has a saber. He's an officer, so he has a saber. And Katie Duvall is like, well, how do you unsheath the saber? And I had him grab the saber, and the animation was beautiful. And he just grabs the guy by the face and shoves him off camera. He's got the saber. And then the next time you see him, he stripped off his coat and bowler, and now he's, I have the turret turn and the doors open, and there's Arcady already with his saber.
Man, sounds like it would have been a pretty good intro. Like it would have solidified just the.
Yeah,
like,
it's just a hook. It's just a hook. Because now he has a saber, right. And it's a good reveal when we do see him with it, but seeing him where he gets it from would have just been like that. Just an extra touch,
right?
Yeah, it reinforces Duvall's side of like he's been embarrassed in front of his men, and he's trying to show how macho and tough he is, and
for his dad,
right? I'll show the old man,
right?
Like,
I'll show him up. But also, it also reinforces going forward that little conversation that Batman and Ra's al Ghul have at the end, where he's like, hey, even though he completely was a loose cannon and was not, he proved to me he was not worthy of running my empire based on how he acted, which is an interesting, you could probably talk about this for another hour, of Ra's al Ghul's characterization of even though he's this man bent on world domination, he has standards. You're not gonna whip people mercilessly, you're not gonna torture them before you kill them. He's got standards.
He gets over the loudspeaker and tells people to run away when he's gonna blow up the railroad. He's not indiscriminately mowing down bystanders.
I love that he has standards as a villain. It's a pretty interesting dynamic.
And I think that also plays into Batman letting him go at the end, right? Because he's not an indiscriminate psychopath like the Joker who's just mowing down everyone. There is that little bit of begrudging respect still between them, where Batman's like, all right, this isn't really a crime being perpetrated here. We'll just let it go.
Again, just David Warner, it's like, my God. It's like, we'll cross swords another day.
Yeah.
Just that delivery is and I know Andrea was giving him direction, but just how naturally he embodies the role. And it's not, God, nowadays, I don't know if anyone else would read the lines like that and be allowed to read them like that. Would there be some pontificating oath?
Right.
Luster out, we shall cross swords another day.
Right.
It's like, no, it's like he just does just so calmly. And I think Troy did that sequence, the end sequence. It's just where he just goes to Robin, Robin's like, okay. We just had a fight. These guys were shooting. He shot up the nursing home there.
We'll let him go. He's off to fly off. All right, we have one final question here, Kevin.
So you already kind of touched on it a little bit, that some other ideas like the Demon or Sergeant Rock. If there was, in the multiverse somewhere, you guys got 13 more episodes after these, and we're going to do another, Ra's al Ghul in history story. Is there one of those where you're like, that's the one I'd do? Is there one of those characters you'd want to match him up with?
I mean, I would go to Enemy Ace.
Really? Wow.
Because, that's something that I would like to do is World War I aerial combat. Animation wise, it's almost a whole category all unto itself. Because, and that's another thing is where in my mind I could create animation shortcuts. Kind of like when I did Macross. Or I did, was it Starcom was the one I did for Deke, but Macross or Starcom. The thing is, they're vehicle shows. So that's where you save your money, is when the people are just this much is showing and they're and all you're doing is cutting to close-ups of them, pulling the trigger or moving that or kicking the pedals. Very simple bits of animation. And then you figure out ways to animate the planes.
There you
go. So that would actually work out. And then just the whole atmosphere, the whole horror of World War One.
Yeah.
How would Ra's al Ghul be dealing with that?
That would be very intriguing.
It's like, would he open up his own front? Was he responsible? Was he responsible for the death of the Romanovs? Maybe he had the Romanovs killed off. Maybe that's what he's planning on. Now he's gonna kills off the Romanovs, they're all related. All the are one. They're related. Now he's going to work. Is he going to move on to Queen Victoria and her family? That's.
I love the tale. Oh
yes.
All right.
So I get little.
Who do we talk to at DC to make sure this happens in some form or fashion? We'll send emails immediately.
I have no idea. I don't even know what they're doing over there now.
Not many people seem to know. Oh man, but. Kevin, thanks so much for spending some time with us talking about this episode. What a fun time. We're excited to kind of break it down here ourselves. But in the meantime, we know you're on Instagram. I've seen you've been doing, I don't know if your commissions are officially open, but I see you've been posting some artwork for commissions that you've done recently. It's been really cool. So, can people contact you directly for those? Is that more of a private thing? I'm not sure.
Well, it's like, they can go. It's like, I think if you go on to Instagram, it's Altieri Arts. I have another one with just my name, but it's like that was just, I don't ignore that.
Yeah.
It's like that was back when, Facebook was like dropping people left and right.
Oh, yeah.
And you can also go see Kevin Altieri. You can contact me on Facebook.
Okay.
Just message me, I'll respond.
Very cool. Well, Kevin's posted some really cool art. I've seen some really awesome stuff that you've done with the Phantasm anniversary. Some Harley Quinn stuff. I saw you did a Phantasm shot of the Batman putting on the cowl on canvas. I've seen digital art. You're doing it all.
That was a commission that's already been sold.
Man.
Yeah, that one I did sell.
Super
that
cool.
One.
Love that one.
I did that one specifically for someone, but
so cool.
But yeah, there's just I've been doing well. That's the problem with being unemployed. But I can actually, it actually gives me time to do things like the painting I did of Mr. Freeze.
I love that one. So cool.
That's something that I've. That's kind of Nora Freeze and Mr. Freeze is Dr. Fibes. Nora, that was my contribution to the iconography.
So good though.
Schumacher swiped it. He had no right to do that. It's like, this isn't Kanan, you moron. How dare
so great. Well, Kevin, we love having you on every time. Thank you so much for spending a little over a half hour with us today chatting about this episode. And we can't wait to have you on again soon.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be my pleasure.
Thanks, guys. What an incredible time there with Kevin, Liam. We can't say enough to thank him not only for donating his time on such short notice, but I think it's interesting when we looked at this episode was coming up when we saw that this episode was coming up on the horizon. We thought, man, it would be really interesting to get some behind the scenes to figure out how this story came to be. How did they pick Jonah Hex? What is this episode? And right. I don't think we could have asked for more with that interview with Kevin. He gave us a lot of incredible insight, and we do once again thank him for his time. And he even showed us before we went on and started recording. He showed us some of the storyboards that he did for the episode. It was a really fantastic time. And every time we have Kevin on the show, it's a treat. But this one, I think. Just hearing his passion and appreciation for this particular episode was contagious enough to really, I think, in some ways influence how I ended up scoring the episode.
Hearing the love of someone who made the show and how much time and effort was put into it, I think really puts it in a different perspective when you're looking at this, as opposed to just your run-of-the-mill 22-minute watch and chat that we do on a usual show.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great to hear him just talk about the different things that he loved about it, and the influences and all of that. So once again, we thank you to Kevin for donating some of his time this week to chat with us about this episode. So, Liam, we don't have to give a full, necessarily in-depth breakdown, and I feel like every time we say that, we end up doing that anyway. But we'll go ahead and give our
today. We don't have the time.
This is an extended bonus, big-sized, giant-sized episode, as we would call it. With the interview with Kevin. So we'll try and keep our synopsis just to the high points as we kick things off for the episode, as Batman and Robin stumble upon a group of what appears to be assassins who are pumping gas into what we later find out is sort of a retirement home or a retirement facility. Ra's al Ghul is present and accounted for, and is absconding with one of its residents. Batman and Robin, meanwhile, are too busy fighting the League of Assassins in order to stop him as he gets away. But leaving behind, he doesn't leave them sort of scratching their heads too much, as he does leave a cassette tape. And hey, I don't think this is a piece of with the resurgence and appreciation for cassette tapes. Like, there are bands that legitimately drop their albums on cassette tapes these days. We don't have to explain this technology to too many people, I think.
That's right. Yeah, I think it's retroactive. We probably have the Guardians of the Galaxy movie largely to thank for that resurgence. But yes, I think you can figure out it's an audio recording of Ra's al Ghul telling a story to Batman and Robin as they race to the airport to try to catch him before he gets on this flight. It's clear that he wants them to find him. The plane he's getting on is called Lazarus. He's not hiding at all. So clearly he wants Batman and Robin to meet him at the airport, and he wants them to hear this story.
There! Lazarus. It's too easy. He wants us to find him.
Let's check this out.
I anticipated meeting you tonight, Detective. I hope the story I have to tell you may cause you to reconsider your pursuit. The year was 1883. Your government was ruthlessly expanding westward.
And from there, for most of the rest of the episode, we are taken away to the Old West, to the Wild Wild West, if you will, and which, as we talked about with Kevin, was a big influence on this episode, especially in the latter half. But yes, we see an old gunslinger coming into town. We, of course, are very quickly introduced to Jonah Hex, a bounty hunter. He's sort of tasked with tracking down this mysterious rogue, Arcady Duval. What a tremendous name, by the way. I don't know who came up with that name, but incredible. We forgot to ask Kevin that. But what an incredible name for like a slimy Old West fancy lad. Like,
that's right. Arcady. They don't make names like that anymore.
Absolutely. But Jonah Hex meets up with the matron of a local establishment, I guess you would say, who gives Jonah Hex a little bit of info, tells him where to find this Arcady Duval, who is holed up, as we find out, in this enormous sort of factory inside of a cave.
Duval comes into town now and then, starts fights, bothers my girls, challenges men to duels.
I'm aware of his habits, Missy. What I ain't aware of is where he's holed up.
Strange thing, that. He ain't staying at the hotel, and the next town's 50 miles away.
Sounds like he likes to sleep on the ground with the rest of the snakes.
He ain't the type. More the clean sheet sort. And he first showed up in town about the time folks started seeing the sky monster.
The what?
No one knows what it is. And the sheriff's too yellow to investigate. It only comes out at night, like a big boat or a log in the sky. About the same time it showed, folks started seeing lights in the... Get down! Way I figure, that glow might some way tie in with the sky monster. And Duval.
Reckon so. I think you better start back now, Missy. Got a feeling things might get loud and busy soon.
Good luck, Jonah Hex.
Right nice sentiment, ma'am. But I never cotton much to luck. I like to make my own.
I'll remember that when I see you next.
And
Hex does drop notes, by the way. She drops those hints about the mysterious sky monster that's appearing.
That's right. The sheriff is too cowardly to investigate.
That's right.
So we know there's some sort of large, a mechanical monster, if you will, out there. Although I guess we don't know it's mechanical quite yet. But we quickly, as he arrives at Arcady Duval's headquarters, we find out it's a giant factory inside of a cave. And not only is Arcady Duval there, but we see his benefactor. The upper management is also there overseeing this project. None other than Ra's al Ghul himself, who is quick to discipline Arcady, as Arcady is a bit more authoritarian with his discipline of his employees, and Ra's doesn't really see the value in that, and kind of routinely, as becomes a theme, keeps dressing Arcady down in front of the men, and just it makes it clear that this guy is a real disappointment to Ra's. And Hex is pretty quickly captured and taken prisoner by Duval's men. And after a little bit more, like we said, we're trying to hit the big beats here, folks. So after a bit of fisticuffs, he's able to escape, and we see what this flying machine, this flying monster that the woman was referring to earlier in the episode. It's a giant airship with giant hydrogen gas balloons carrying it through the city. And we find out why they're doing this, in fact, is none other than Ra's al Ghul's plan, as what else would Ra's plan be? But he is upset with the construction of the railroad, the first railroad connecting the east and west coasts of the United States, because of the devastation it has had on the forestation of the United States. And so he's taking this giant airship and he's just opening fire on the railroad.
Work, you lazy good-for-nothing. I've told you repeatedly this is not how I do things. I beg your pardon, sir. I was hoping to expedite the completion of the airship. Commendable, but not at the expense of my workforce. Good men are hard to find in these parts, and there is still much to be done. The government's western expansion is destroying this land. Drastic steps must be taken to preserve the wilderness. And Ra's al Ghul is the one to do it. Who better than I? I'll destroy the railroad and bomb other railroad junctions as I move eastward toward Washington. Once Washington is in flames, I'll force the United States government to declare me Master of America. Whatever you say.
And let's not bury the lead here. After he destroys, he's defending the forestation. That is a big part of it. But he's not gonna stop with this one railroad. He's going all the way back across towards the east, destroying every railroad junction in his path until he gets to Washington, and then he's gonna force them to make him the Master of America.
That's right. So he's got grand designs, as Ra's always does, under the guise of perhaps protecting the environment. But yes, this is his plan, and they open fire, and it's clear that the soldiers that are there to defend are quite overmatched with their muskets. That Ra's has advanced technology here that they simply cannot match, as he's got this flying machine with giant cannons and machine guns and all of this. So as we approach, as we said, Jonah Hex is able to escape and make his way onto the airship. He contends with some of the henchmen before having a sword versus knife fight with Arcady Duval, and he sets off a cannon which blows up one of the giant hydrogen engines, causing the ship to crash. Ra's escapes on a great old-timey Wright brothers plane, and as we finish our story, Duval begs Jonah Hex, offers him $5,000 in gold to leave him alone, But as has been clear, as we talked about with Kevin, Jonah Hex ain't he ain't doing this for old Uncle Sam. He's not exactly maybe the biggest fan of the United States government, but he is a bounty hunter and he is a man with a certain code, and that code means that he's got to bring Duval in alive for as they allude to, quote, what you did to that girl back east. So that's sort of where our tale ends.
5,000 in gold. Take it. Leave me be.
It ain't about money, boy. It's about justice. And I aim to serve you, son.
Let me live, please.
I will. Only because it's too much trouble to haul your stinking carcass back east. I'm getting too old for this.
And as Batman and Robin arrive on the tarmac as Ra's is about to board his flight, we get the reveal of just who that old person at the nursing home that Ra's absconded with at the start of the episode is.
Yes, indeed. The dynamic duo finally confronting Ra's kind of filling in the blanks as to why that tale was relevant, as they reveal that the person in the wheelchair that they've absconded with is in fact Duval, as we see the scar matches the scar on Duval's face. Batman, being the world's greatest detective, has already deduced that this was Duval, and that's why Ra's was telling him this tale. But what he doesn't quite understand is why he went through all of this trouble. Ra's continues to mention that after Jonah Hex remanded him into custody of the authorities, he was sentenced to 50 years hard labor. But Batman also, of course, is confused as to how over 100 years later he could still be alive. Ra's, of course, mentions that after that 50 years of hard labor, he, of course, allowed him to utilize the Lazarus pits, which has kept him alive this long. However, the Lazarus pits effects no longer work. And Batman, again, is starting to put the pieces of the puzzle together, but not quite all of them, as Ra's finally reveals that his deep care for Duval, even though he quickly realized that he was not someone that would be able to succeed him in his quest for ruling the world, as he has so often tried to recruit Batman for, he does reveal that Duval was in fact one of his sons, and that is the true reason why he couldn't turn his back on him at this point, despite all of their differences and the fact that they couldn't quite ever see eye to eye, and that they did things very differently, and that he wasn't worthy of inheriting Ra's crown, so to speak. He does have a deep love for him as his son.
You left Duval to his fate a century ago. Why come back for him now?
Did you really think, Detective, that in my 600 years of life I would have sired only one offspring? Even before the Phoenix debacle, I had come to realize that Arcady was too unbalanced and cruel to wisely rule my empire.
But you couldn't forget about him.
What father can ever forget his son? Come now, Detective, I've still a few good years left. We will cross swords another day. But for now, let me take my boy home.
He requests that Batman leave him be and allow them to take each other on another day, as Ra's reminds him as he has several good years left in which they'll be able to cross paths. But in the meantime, he requests of Batman to let him go and to be with his son for his final moments on Earth. And Batman obliges, closes his cape, turns back to the Batmobile, and speeds off as he allows Ra's to board the plane with his dying son. And that's kind of where we end things on for the episode, Liam. So Batman knows that he'll live to fight another day against Ra's, and we see this odd sort of dynamic in their relationship of mutual respect, as Batman shows him respect in a way to allow him to sort of experience these last moments with his son in peace. So let's go ahead and chat about our thoughts on the plot. As I mentioned, I think if you had asked me 20 years ago, even 30 years ago, what I thought of this episode, well, this episode wasn't around 30 years ago, but 28 years ago, what I thought of this episode, I don't know that I would have ranked it very high. As we mentioned, not a lot of Batman. It's not very true to the series in the way that you're used to. But I think looking at this through a critical eye, knowing the backstory and the influences, we talked about how the Wild Wild West television show was a big favorite of ours. It was a favorite of our dads, and then passed down to us as a favorite, and we enjoyed that. So that being an influence to the episode, you can see the hallmarks of a Wild Wild West episode throughout this as an influence. And I think just the idea of sort of an old gunslinger on his last leg, that is a classic DC hero that, as we talked about with Kevin, wasn't someone that we could appreciate as kids. But now that we're older, we know a little bit about the history of the character and can appreciate it a little bit more. I think it changes how I look at this episode. It certainly changes how I look at this episode. It's also so far out of the box in so many ways for
swing.
What this show was. Yeah.
A big swing.
Yeah. And you have you have three huge giants of this show working on it with Paul Dini and Bruce Timm and Kevin, all working together to create the story and collaborating and bringing it to life. And how this ended up on Fox is still like a head scratcher. It's pretty funny hearing Kevin talk about that. But yeah, I think all of that works together for a really interesting episode. And the Batman parts, I think it does further that mutual respect that Batman and Ra's have for each other. It adds that odd dynamic, and the differentiation, as you mentioned when we were talking to Kevin about the Ra's character versus a Joker or Killer Croc or any of these sort of maniacal villains who are simply out to murder people for the fun of it, versus this kind of mutual respect that they have between the two. So yeah, I think all of that works together. And I think looking at the episode, understanding a little bit more of the subtext and things that you weren't able to quite appreciate. He's out seeking revenge for this lady of the night that was victimized by this guy, and it's very Old West on the nose for that stuff. So I really enjoyed this episode, especially of course with the insight from Kevin and the eyes of an adult sort of being able to appreciate the influences and the stylization of the episode. So for all those reasons, I ended up giving it a pretty strong 8 out of 10 for my score.
Yeah, I give it the exact same score. I think it's a really, really for all the reasons you've just talked about. It's so outside of the box. The story told is an interesting one. Like we said, Jonah Hex is not the squeaky clean protagonist. As we talked about with Kevin, there was sort of this idea that he was an East Texan Confederate, old Confederate, and then he's not necessarily, his ledger isn't necessarily the cleanest, but he's got sort of this moral code. And at the end of the day, he's nearing the end of his life, and he's sort of a little bit, a man out of time almost. And I like that aspect of it. I think it's really interesting take on him to not do maybe, he's not young, quipping. He's this old man nearing the end of his life, nearing the end of his adventures. And I just think that's a really interesting slant to take on Jonah Hex, on top of just the fact that we got a Jonah Hex story at all. I think that's really interesting. And then the ending with Ra's, as we talked about, it's the very unique Ra's and Batman relationship that he doesn't have with any of his other villains, really, which is that there is this sort of respect and the personal nature in which Ra's appeals to Batman, like, give this father a little more time with his son. Like, who better than Batman would want, who Bruce Wayne would not stand in the way of that, right? Like, it's kind of a beautiful poetic moment when he asks, just let me take my boy, like, let me just go. And he's the implication being like, he's old, he's going to die soon. I just want to be with him when he goes. And who is Batman's not going to stand in the way of that. There'll be plenty of times to, as he says, cross swords later on. So it's I just think that ending is fantastic, and the whole idea of doing this story, doing an Old West story. It's also like 1995, there wasn't like a lot of cowboy stuff around. Like, I feel like it's almost, you can do a Western now, there's Quentin Tarantino movies and, big AAA blockbuster video games where you're a cowboy now. I feel like this episode maybe wouldn't be as much of out of left field if it was on an episode, let's say an episode of Batman Caped Crusader did a Jonah Hex episode, or Batman the Brave and the Bold, as we talk about from time to time. It wouldn't seem so out of left field. But cowboys, as we talked about with Kevin, steampunk wasn't really an aesthetic that existed yet. We'll certainly talk more about that in visuals in a second. So just the uniqueness and the willing to take such a big swing, and the specific way they told the story, and the age that Jonah Hex is in the story. And then that ending with, as I said, with Ra's and Batman on the tarmac is, I think, just fantastic.
Yeah, and I think last thing I'll just add to that is, I think now it would be easy. It's easy to look through in 2023 eyes. You've had sort of the burned out hero trope is sort of like a tried and true Hollywood story nowadays. We've seen it done so incredibly well with the Logan movie, like the Old Man Logan movie, and all everything since then that has come out and sort of repeated this, I'm too old for this stuff, tired out, worn out hero who's on his last leg. Like, that's, again, at this time in 1995, you didn't quite have as many stories like that outside of those classic Western stories that were the direct influence for a lot of this material. So I love that, history continues to repeat itself. It's, time is a flat circle and all of that stuff. But, when you look at this at that time, this was not drawing off of any of that modern stuff that we've seen now, and especially in superheroes, that plays so much into that same theme. So again, another outside of the box thought of like bringing in those, worn down cowboys, back on for one last rodeo, so to speak. So yeah, I love that. All of that, I think, certainly reflects in our high scores and high praise, certainly, for the plot. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be animation and visuals. We talked a lot about some of the influence already, and with Kevin, we talked a lot about the fun stuff. So we don't have to hit all of the high notes again for this, but we can certainly discuss some of the things that maybe we didn't talk about, or the things that we want to reiterate. But Dong Yang, responsible for the animation for this week. And it's interesting because I think one of the things that Kevin mentioned specifically when he was talking about some of the action sequences, specifically that final sword fight, was he was so pleased with the way that final sword fight came out that it didn't bother him as much that characters were off model or what have you. And I think that directly certainly was one of the first things when you and I watched it together, that this noted. Like, there's a lot of wonky looking character models here in this episode, and it varies from scene to scene. And it's interesting because we don't have that much screen time for characters that would have a standard model. So maybe it's just more glaringly obvious in those few short sequences. Our opening sequence at the old folks' home with Batman versus and Robin versus the League of Shadows, or that final sequence with Ra's on the tarmac. But overall, I think the character models were what stood out as the big negative for me, which is a fraction of what we ended up getting for the episode, as far as I'm concerned, for low lights.
Absolutely.
I think the strong points, of course, for the episode are going to be certainly the set pieces. We talked about how with Kevin that these are all new character models, and they had a lot of fun with that. That final sequence once they board the Phoenix and they're the fisticuffs, the hand-to-hand combat that Jonah Hex has with the men on board, and then the sword fight. And it's interesting because I think when I watched the sword fight a second time, I think the animation for that and the way that the characters ended up being animated, while it doesn't look standard for maybe the rest of the BTOS run, it is very streamlined and similar to the Superman the Animated Series animation that we would see. It is, I think it's a little less, there's a little less cell shading, and some of that is because I think most of the action takes place during the day outside on the hull of the ship,
right?
Or on the deck of the ship. But it's so you don't have as much shadow and things that add those cell shading. But it is like the bend and stretch and stuff that Kevin alluded to really does create more of a dynamic, streamlined look that we would later see, in the next series. So I think when looking at that, I was like, okay, all right, I can see the DNA of how this stuff was streamlined and made to look a little bit more easier to animate, I think, from an episode like this where you're in the final run of this BTOS series. So very interesting. Again, I don't know how much of that had to do with the daylight and affecting everything, but it was just something that I noticed. I felt like the characters could have also been the storyboard artists, eventually worked on some of the Superman stuff, of course, too. But yeah, I did notice that. But yeah, I think we talked about the airplanes and the way that the airplanes looked. I will just say we didn't get a chance to talk about it with Kevin directly, but I love period piece Ra's al Ghul's top hat and monocle.
Incredible. Incredible. Yeah, we really should have mentioned that to him. I don't know if that's who gets the credit for designing that outfit, but it's just perfect. Like, the tallest top hat you've ever seen, the monocle, it's just
Mr. Peanut.
Absolutely.
He's got the spats. He's got it all,
Oh, it's incredible. Yeah, he looks fantastic. He wears it well. But yes, there's so much as we talked about with Kevin in that third act, especially, that's just so unique. As you said, they basically had to design a whole world from the ground up, as he said, with his with people that worked on the backgrounds all the way to the incidental characters, the extras, if you will, all the way through to giving Arcady and Ra's their unique looks. This, as we said, older, haggard Jonah Hex, which, I mean, as we've alluded to all week on social media, he does bear a striking resemblance. This older Jonah Hex, striking resemblance to former Minnesota governor and pro wrestling Hall of Famer Jesse the Body Ventura. It must be said.
Yeah, that was an immediate, we've talked about predicting the future and retroactive Easter eggs. I don't think they could have predicted that one in a million years, that the drawing of old man Jonah Hex would so strongly resemble Jesse the Body. But once you see it, you really can't unsee it, and it's made this week extremely fun. In fact, I'm going to cut in here. I created a sequence using the wonderful world of AI. What would it sound like if Jesse the Body Ventura was cast for this episode as Jonah Hex? Let's roll that.
It would appear we have ourselves a government spy. A rather disreputable-looking one at that. Well, Mr. Spy, I'd say your plan has failed, and the railroad is doomed.
I ain't no spy. I'm Jonah Hex, and I don't give a tinker's cuss about no railroad. I've come to get you, Arcady Duvall, on account of what you've done to that girl back east.
You mean to say you've tracked me across 12 states because of that?
Well, there's also the matter of a $200 reward. That don't hurt my feelings none.
You're either a liar or a fool.
I've been known to be foolish, but ain't nobody calls me a liar and goes to bed happy.
Give him a lead bomb.
Unbelievable. I was rolling when you sent that to me during the week here, and I think it's posted on our socials as well. If you'd like to just just isolate robot Jesse Ventura voicing Jonah Hex's lines, but it matches up almost a little too well. It's so funny combined with the visual, as we mentioned, of the long white skullet, I believe that's referred to. Really, I love that Jonah Hex design. It's so striking. The big yellow eye that he has with it on the and the hole in his face and everything is just incredible. I believe Kevin credits Bruce Timm with that specific character design. So yeah, just great. Like I said, it's hard to find too much fault. I think Kevin even says that it's like, who cares if they're on model when like everything else looks so good. I will say and the only other thing that I really wanted to mention in visuals that we've probably already may have alluded to in the interview with Kevin, I think is as mentioned, Robin, as Kevin always likes to point out, Robin fights dirty, and the shot of Robin just like squatting down, throwing the punch, and then we see the very expressive sort of Spider-Man like eyes of the League of Assassins ninja as Robin connects with his below the belt shot, we'll say. Just perfect, incredible comedy. The way it's cut around, as we've talked about, you can't necessarily show the impact of it, but it's incredible. And I think it was also used in a lot of, as we talked about off the air, a lot of Fox Kids ads used this clip of Robin punching this guy in the groin. So really, that's a moment from the series that always sticks out to me from this episode as well. There's just as another example, as is often the case in Robin appearances with a Kevin Altieri directed episode, is he's a dirty fighter. He likes to find a way to work that in, and it's a great little sequence at the start with Batman and Robin arriving to take on the ninjas while Raish and Ubu go collect Duvall. So
no, I agree. I think one of the hallmarks of this episode, and we briefly mentioned it to Kevin with standards and practices rules about things and what could and couldn't be seen, is there's a lot of cutting around and showing things without showing it. The scene where Jonah Hex gets captured initially by Arcady's men, you only see the shadows of them tackling him, and then there's like 4 or 5 closed punches. Like, you hear the impact and you see the shadows punching something, like you can't quite make out what it is, but they're clearly connecting and beating Jonah Hex. And that's something you couldn't show the closed fist violence with, but the artistic way of, hey, we're going to shoot up. You see the top of the cave and the light, casting these shadows up there, and then them beating him. The shadows are beating him. That, and then even the opening sequence of Jonah Hex as he arrives into this small town, is they don't show his face. You only see, knees up or knees down or neck down for the first little opening sequence, but you see everybody's reaction to this horrific looking scarred man. And then even when the people in the saloon see him, they also sort of freak out. And then you don't get the full reveal. You only get the half of it, the good side of his face. And then eventually you turn and see this horribly scarred man. Just what the storytelling of what you don't see, obviously a hallmark of this show. That's how they got around so much of the standards and practices. But man, the storytelling that you're able to do through music, the voice acting, and certainly even the visuals of what you don't see, the implied visuals, is so strong, and done so well repeatedly over in this episode. Just for all those reasons, we talked about it already, just the steampunk aesthetic, even with the characters being off model in some of the scenes. We didn't even talk about Ra's al Ghul's cape movement in the final, on the tarmac in the final scene. We get some cape movement there from Ra's, and
a very dramatic, like Batman is standing there with his cape at his back and then like wraps it around himself when he's leaving. It's very, very dramatic movements in that last scene.
Yeah, it's great. I think this episode is really strong. Maybe surprised me, especially based on how off model everybody looked at the beginning, but makes up for it with all these new character models and the different things that Kevin mentioned, throughout the episode there. But I ended up giving it a pretty strong 8 out of 10, maybe even based solely on that swashbuckling finale of a sword fight. Really, really fun stuff in that one too.
Yeah, I went 1 point higher. I went 9 out of 10. I just think it's I will say, especially Robin's face, I feel like just kept changing sizes, and that took me out of it a little bit. So that might have knocked it down from the perfect score. But as like I said, as Kevin said in his interview with us, when the rest of it looks so good, you can forgive little things like that a lot, and that's certainly the case with that. Really that entire third act. But as you mentioned, yes, him sort of skulking around in the factory beforehand, and when he hides under the hay to fool the guard, and then
I love that sequence. So good.
Fantastic. And then again, you talk about one of the cuts where you get the fist flying towards the camera, and then the big red flash, and then the guards on the ground. Just great stuff. So and as Kevin talked about, just the fact that they had to design an entire town, and then all these vehicles, and the soldiers, and the crowd, and the crowd listening to the governor or whoever give their speech. It's just an incredible achievement for. I mean, this isn't a standalone movie. This was just one of however many, the last 10 or 20, 22-minute cartoons they got to do for Fox Kids here. This was just one of them, and the fact that they were able to put so much time and effort into creating this entire world. Essentially it ends up being a one and done, because we don't get any more adventures of Jonah Hex in the Old West. So it's the amount of effort is just staggering, and how good everything looks, especially in that third act. It's just incredible.
Absolutely. And somebody's going to tweet if we don't mention it, but yes, of course, Jonah Hex does return in Justice League Unlimited, but that doesn't count.
He's the younger. That's like I don't know. He's played by honestly, I would say he kind of looks like Josh Brolin, but that brings up unfortunate comparisons to the live action film. So he's a much younger man at that point, and he looks and sounds completely different. So it's really not comparable, in my opinion, to the Hex we see here.
Yeah, and it's not it's not a Jonah Hex focused episode. He's a character in the show, but he's not the star of the episode as he was in this case. So we will move on, Liam, to our next category, which is going to be music. And I believe you said at the top, Todd Haven responsible for the music.
Correct. Not a name this is another one, I think, maybe towards the back end of these BTOS episodes. There were more wouldn't say fill in, but not full time working on the series composers. I will say I expected maybe more like Old West music. Like I was expecting the Forgotten almost.
Harmonica, straight up
a lot of harmonica and acoustic guitar and that sort of thing. And we get a little bit of it, and we certainly get that. I think at the beginning when Hex is walking in the town, and and at the end when he's loading, when he loads Duval up on his shoulder and he's going to take him to face justice. We get touches of it, and but it's we still get a lot of like grand horns and things like when the Phoenix is revealed and stuff. They don't lean too hard on the I guess the pat Old West music aesthetic for this. Like they still go for more, and maybe that plays into the the sort of again, now we would call it steampunk, but the sort of retro the retro science fiction, the Old West science fiction of this giant this giant factory and this giant flying ship with cannons and machine guns, where it didn't necessarily feel appropriate to do gunslinger, this town ain't big enough for the two of us music. But yeah, it didn't necessarily lay into the Old West aesthetic as much as you might expect them to.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, it is the first thing you hear when the title card pops up, and then as we get his reveal, him being Jonah Hex. Jonah Hex is walking through the town. There's some harmonica there. It does play. Interestingly enough, it plays in that final sequence on the tarmac when they reveal that it's Arcady. Up to that point, it's strings, it's sort of like laying low in the background. And then once they cut and you kind of get the verbal reveal that this is Arcady, they show his face, and then the harmonica comes back in, and he sort of melds the harmonica in with the strings for that final sequence. But to your point, the reveal of the Phoenix as the shadow is cast across this town, and as it's laying waste to this railroad town, that is all strings and horns, and some flute as they're thrown overboard and stuff like that. So it doesn't completely rely or lay in, as like you said, as you might expect, to a more Western theme. And I don't know if that was, hey, we're already doing so much that's different when it comes to the animation, the storytelling that we're doing here. We don't want it to feel completely alien, like we're going completely outside of the box. So let's keep it somewhat grounded in what we're used to in the orchestra. It's probably also using the resources that they had available. You have a giant full orchestra to score your episode, so you're going to use some of those other instruments for the more serious, heavy scenes. I really like the way that the sword fight is done. It starts with horns and strings. It actually starts. There was like a similar pacing to the strings at the beginning of it, and we'll talk about it here why that matters so much. But it's the similar tempo and pacing to the Metallo theme that brings in the strings. It's a very similar feeling. It's not exact, it's not the same tune, but it's the same tempo and pace as the sword fight is starting. And it's like it just, I was like, man, that reminds me so much of the Metallo piece. Like, you could tweak that tune a little bit and get the Metallo tune out of it. So very interesting there that I noticed. But then as the Phoenix begins to crash, you get this one sequence that's completely drums that has just like a little bit of bass behind it, but it's mostly just drums playing. And then it cuts to harmonica mixed with strings as they're sort of evacuating as Arcady and Hex come face to face in this final sequence where he's begging for his life. So, overall, there are different portions of it that certainly feel like that set in the Old West, your traditional Western music, but it's not a complete overhaul. I probably would have liked to have heard that a little bit more, if I'm being honest with you, which is why I ended up giving music a 7 out of 10. I still think there's a lot of great sequences. I think that sword fight, the way that the music sort of is sort of this amalgamation of everything, and especially that one piece with just drums with just like a little tiny tune behind it. I really liked it. So, but still, 7 out of 10 is still a pretty good score, I'd say.
Yeah. In fact, I agree so much. I gave it the exact same score of 7 out of 10. Definitely, like you said, definitely some memorable moments. The all drum sequence, or mostly drum sequence, I did really enjoy. But not necessarily like and there certainly is like a Jonah Hex theme, I think we hear as we just talked about, but it's not it's not one that necessarily sticks with you the way that some of the other grand character themes do. So still a very strong score from both of us, though.
Absolutely. Liam, let's roll on to our final category of the day, which is going to be our voice acting. We talked about some of our players already and some of their previous roles, so we'll just touch on them briefly here for this week's episode. But let's go ahead and talk about the voice cast and give some scores for our voice actors.
Absolutely. So as mentioned, we had Elizabeth Montgomery, Samantha from the classic Bewitched television series herself, playing the, as she is credited, barmaid in this episode. Sure. I guess we can call it that. We also have, as mentioned, Michael Bell as the airman. We have William Bryan as the sheriff. And sitting senator, or former, I believe he's now just recently left office, actually, but Senator Patrick Leahy, is it Leahy? How is it? Leahy. Senator Patrick Leahy as the governor, who gets a nice long speech there. And that's just kind of a weird fun note that gentleman, in addition to being a long serving senator in the state of Vermont, happens to just pop up in a lot. He's a big Batman guy, as it turns out, and
a lot of Batman. I think he's been in a bunch of the last several Batman themed movies that I'm aware.
That's right. I feel like, so technically Batman Forever, which he was in, came out first. Though I imagine he recorded his lines for this episode before Batman Forever came out. So, or maybe concurrently, who knows? But yes, those are his sole credits. If you look at it, it's Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, The Dark Knight. Oh, I'm sorry, he was in My Wife is a Vampire too. So it's that one. And then the Dark Knight Rises and Batman v Superman. So yeah, fun little cameo from at the time a sitting civil servant there. But yeah, getting to our main cast, we of course have Bill McKinney as Jonah Hex. As mentioned, though perhaps to a layman like ourselves, maybe best known for his role in Deliverance. He also worked alongside, as Kevin mentioned, people like John Wayne, people like Clint Eastwood. He is, that era of Hollywood in the way that superhero, it's something that I think is hard to comprehend maybe for our generation and people younger than us, but it's like the way that Westerns dominated cinema, the way that superheroes or other sort of, over the top action movies, maybe in the past couple of decades have, Westerns were everywhere, and Mr. McKinney had a role in quite a few of them. So yeah, him playing the aging cowboy going out for one of his last adventures here, wasn't too much of a tough ask, I don't think, for Mr. McKinney. But I love old man Jonah Hex. Like, I think he's just got a real funny, like, sort of sardonic wit about him, and then he's not he might not be the nicest guy or the most upstanding citizen. He clearly has this sort of this ultimate code that he lives by about what's right and what's wrong, and he's gonna see to it that this Duvall guy, no matter what, he's old, he's swinging around on ropes as everything blows up around him in this big flying machine, but gosh darn it, he's gonna get his man. He's a bounty hunter, and he's gonna get his man.
Yeah, he's I think his performance is very much in the style of like that old Western. I mean, he's playing a cowboy from an old Western. Like, that's what he's doing. I think if you aren't familiar with that style of acting or that particular characterization of someone, you might think that these lines are maybe just kind of being understated, or he's just kind of going through the motions, because he doesn't show a lot of emotion, but that's the characterization of that style character.
Oh yeah,
very very humble and down to earth. He's got a line or two that'll let you know that he's not going to roll over and play dead. He's got a couple quips. They're going to be understated, but he'll cut you with them. Like, he certainly goes out of his way to make sure that he tries to match wits with Arcady, and he does so pretty well. But yeah, I think if you're not familiar with the old Westerns or how those characters tended to talk in those movies, you might not be a fan of this performance. But I think our love and appreciation for that old style of Hollywood, and specifically a character that was written like this, he fits that character, that quiet humility, just going about his business. This is his job. He's going to bring killers to justice, and then he's going to go have a drink, and he's going to talk the same way that he does to, the madam at the saloon, that he does to the sheriff, and talk to the evil guy that did whatever he did to the woman that he's trying to defend. Like he talks to them all with the same tone. Nothing gets too excited. He's not too excitable. He's not too stressed. He's not too angry. He's just kind of monotone. But I think that's the characterization versus like this guy can't act. So yeah, I appreciated that characterization that he chose to give for this character.
Absolutely, and I think we talked about this a little bit with Kevin as well. But it's understated on purpose, to your point, like, which is basically what you've just been saying for 3 minutes. I'm just repeating it, but no, I think like he's purposefully understated and not showing, maybe a traditional cartoon voice actor emotion, but it's pretty perfect when you realize, that's the role he was hired to play. And speaking of some of our other voice actors, we of course have the great Malcolm McDowell. As we talked about, we already talked about his with Kevin. We talked about the book series and movies that sort of inspired this character, and how Malcolm McDowell had played that role in the movie. And so, who else but him could get the call for Arcady Duvall? And obviously the first of many. We've talked about Mr. McDowell several times on this show due to his role as Metallo later on. But seeing here, as it is sometimes fun when we find the first appearance of one of our recurring voice actors. Here we have Mr. McDowell, and as we talked about, he's just perfect. It's just this slimy, rich creep. Like he just thinks he's better than everyone. And he's, like you said, the first thing you see of him is him whipping the factory workers, and about David Warner in a moment here, but him playing off of Raish, playing off of Mr. McKinney as Jonah Hex. There's nothing redeemable about this guy. He's just such a slime ball.
He's slimy. He's like, you want him to see him get his comeuppance. Like, it's everything that a smarmy villain should be. And I think that, again, that tells more of it's more of the stuff that they communicated without showing, right? So you don't know specifically. There's allusions to what he did, but you don't know specifically what harm befell this woman that Jonah Hex is after to bring him to justice for. But everything that this guy is characterized as explains that this is a guy that you want to see get his ass handed to him, right? You want to see justice served to this guy. He's mean to people. He's overly brutal to the people that are working for him. He seems to have no qualms with trying to boil a man alive. He's taking quite enjoyment. The line where he says, "Let's see if we can make the other side match," to Jonah Hex as he hangs him over a boiling cauldron of hot liquid. Like, this guy is straight up evil. And then at the end, the icing on the cake is, once he's finally cornered and he's about to get justice served to him, he's cowering and throws money and begs, "Here, take money, please." Clearly is at the end of his rope, and suddenly, when he doesn't have the ability to feel like he's this he doesn't have the advantage in the fight anymore, he's cowering, and the sniveling little person that he is comes out. So yeah, a great characterization. We already talked about the dynamic between him and his dad for the episode, David Warner, and the bombastic, boisterous, delivery of all of his lines, and the haughtiness that's come, and arrogance that come from the delivery that he gives every line that he has. Unsurprisingly, in a tremendous voice actor, and as we talked about, laying the groundwork for what would be a defining role for this series in Metallo later on. But interestingly, I didn't struggle with this is Metallo characterization with his voice for some reason. That's usually something that I struggle with. We've talked about that countless times when somebody plays dual roles or, plays a certain role, but comes back later on to do a different role. I didn't quite listen to this and hear, oh, that's Metallo every single time that he spoke, other than recognizing, oh, okay, that's Mr. McDowell clearly. So I think that also adds something to it. So I really enjoy this performance. And I think that character, if you would cast somebody else in that role, you wouldn't want to see the justice brought to him quite as much.
Absolutely, yes. There's just nothing redeemable about this guy. He's Mr. McDowell plays him so well, and that's a great point too. We talk about that all the time when we find one of our iconic voice actors in a different role. Sometimes it can be distracting. It can take you out of it. The fact that he's able to, even though it's still, as you said, still very clearly Malcolm McDowell, his voice, but it's just there's not. It doesn't feel like the same character at all, which is just, again, a credit to him as an actor and to Andrea Romano as the voice director. And then our main three to talk about here, other than Mr. Hex, we have David Warner, as mentioned, as Ra's al Ghul. Ends up being his swan song for this original Batman the Animated Series. Obviously, he does pop up a few more times in episodes we've yet to cover for obvious reasons. But man, he's great in the flashback sequences that we've just talked about with Malcolm McDowell. And then as I talked to, I was so drawn in by that final scene, at the airport with him talking to Batman. And, there's a little bit of humor when he says, like, did you really think in 600 years I'd only sired one kid? Like he's something sort of this sort of wit about him, and then there's that just very completely. It's not there's no chest thumping. There's no secret plot behind the words when he just says, let me take my boy and go home. Like he's so brilliant. Is Mr. Warner in this episode? I was just really struck at. It really almost kind of obviously Mr. Warner has passed away within the last year. Man, I was just really struck by again an actor who is certainly better known for either his work on the stage or his work in front of the camera. But my goodness, he was just born to play Ra's al Ghul. I'm sure we've sung his praises every other time we've gotten to talk about him as well. But this maybe being his last episode of the original series, you're like, gosh, I could have done like 10 more episodes of Ra's al Ghul showing up just to hear more chances for David Warner to play him.
It's really a shame that we didn't get a Justice League Ra's episode. Yeah. I feel like there's money left on the table, so to speak, with that one.
I think we talked about when we reviewed it, he was supposed to be in Wake the Dead, I believe, but that's one of the few. I know just people that worked on JLU have kind of said that the whole Bat embargo was a bit overblown by fans as to who they were and were not allowed to use. But with Ra's being a member of the cast of Batman Begins, he was deemed off limits in that era. So we missed out on at least one more appearance by Mr. Warner in all likelihood.
Yeah, but to your point, I think that final scene, there's such a roller coaster sort of emotion that he has to explain. He is trying to, and successfully, I think one could argue that he manipulates Batman into letting him go. His sweet talking and the way that he characterizes this, I'm just a poor dad with my son, and I just want to spend these final few, however many years he has left. Let me be. Like, he's able to convince Batman, who's this staunch man of justice. He's Jonah Hex in this story, and he lets him go. He lets the bad guy go, albeit for different reasons, obviously. But Ra's manages to outsmart Batman, to use his son as an emotional tool to have Batman let him go. So this roller coaster that he has to give of, he talks about how Duvall is was too unbalanced and cruel, and you can feel the disappointment in the characterization that he gives of that his son in that moment. Even as he realized he was too unbalanced and cruel, that he wouldn't be able to succeed me in my mission. Like, you can feel the disappointment that he has in Arcady in that moment. Like, this was the guy that I set up, but he was a loose cannon that wouldn't just be cool, and he's communicating that disappointment Absolutely. Of that character. And then he comes to the next point where we get the reveal of him, that this is his son. And he has the compassionate moment of, what father could ever forget his son? And you get this really sad, sappy moment where you almost feel like, is Raish is he compassionate? Does Batman need to empathize with Raish in this moment? Which is hilarious, because we know the manipulation that he's already done in his using Talia, his own daughter, to manipulate Batman in an attempt to placate or to play into Batman's emotions and sympathy and compassion. And then we know later on the type of craziness that happens eventually in Batman Beyond. So yeah, Raish is a master manipulator, and I feel like this scene is a very subtle way of revealing that type of manipulation that he's able to do with just a verbal with his verbal speak, his conversational skills. So Mr. Warner had to communicate all of that sort of subtext and the emotion and the sadness of this moment of the realization that his son is dying, even though he didn't care for his son. Yeah. He let his son rot in hard labor for 50 years. But this is really just another key and an excuse to let Batman let him go. So all of that comes out in that performance, I think, for Mr. Warner. I think in the scenes that we get during the flashback are great. Also, his frustration with Arcady. We talked about it with Kevin. His at least, I don't know if you can call it compassion in that sense, but his willingness to try and spare human life, to warn people to get out of his way. Like, you're either with me or against me, get out of my way. I'm going to destroy all these buildings. So everybody get out. Like, you stay here at your own peril, he says. So all of that is fun stuff. A wonderful performance from Mr. Warner, not surprising, based on everything we know about his past performances. This is another one where maybe he took the back seat or he was more of a supporting player in this episode as opposed to his other appearances, but still a really fun appearance from him.
Absolutely. Can't say enough good things. And yeah, wrapping up, we of course have who's left? Just our regular dynamic duo. Lauren Lester as Robin doesn't get much to do here, but nor does Kevin Conroy as Batman, because as we've been talking about for the last hour or so, there's not a lot of Batman and Robin in this episode across our 22 minutes or 21 minutes, as we found out. A little extra time cut off due to it being a Saturday morning airing, but still solid job from our dynamic duo, as one might expect, and that will lead us towards, I guess, our scores here. So everything.
Sorry, I will mention one thing. Batman, as you mentioned, doesn't get a whole lot, but I did love the line where right at the beginning, Raish is walking through the old folks' home. And he mentions that the people they don't have to worry about the attendants in the old folks' home, that they'll be asleep for hours. But then you get this voiceover of Batman saying, "But I won't," and then he swoops in to fight the League of Shadows. So not a ton for Batman to do here, but I did love that line. That was a classic. You could see that in a comic book panel, and it was delivered with expertise, unsurprisingly, by the late great Kevin Conroy.
Absolutely. Maximizing your minutes, I believe that's called, as Mr. Conroy does there. So for all the reasons we've just heaping praise upon this voice cast, I really didn't feel like I could give it anything but a perfect 10 out of 10 for my voice acting. Like I said, I love the understated cowboy, playing like a cowboy in an Old West picture. I love that from Mr. McKinney, and then Malcolm McDowell and David Warner as our villains of this piece. Just outstanding, just absolutely outstanding. So didn't really feel like I had a choice but to give it the perfect score this time.
There you go. And I gave it the same exact score, a perfect 10 out of 10. Agree wholeheartedly with everything. We just heaped a bunch of praise on everybody and said how great they were. So I don't know if we could go any further without giving 10. So yeah, wholeheartedly agree with that. Worthy of high scores for both of us. All right, Liam, let's total up. That is the bonus point sound.
I haven't heard that in a while. I thought it was broken.
That's right. It's been a while, but bonus point sound there, which of course means that one of us has a bonus point, and it is me. It is I that have the bonus point. So, Liam, I'm just going to award this. We already touched on it briefly. We don't have to go in depth, but I love the out of the box. We're going to pitch a 19 minutes of a 21-minute episode, not featuring Batman and featuring this hero that probably a lot of network executives had never heard of or thought about before. And we're going to tell this story, and we're going to have fun, and we're going to give all these homages to old Western, but not make it a straight up, remember this type of episode. It's influenced by, but we're not just going to do flashbacks to old, live action Westerns here. So I love all of that. And as we mentioned at the top, talking with Kevin, the Wild Wild West was an influence, and that, of course, so near and dear to both of us. I love that that's something that played a direct role in inspiring this episode. So half a point for each of those reasons. Out of the box, Wild Wild West, make a single extra bonus point here. So
yeah, and this isn't a bonus point, but if we didn't mention it, that title card, outstanding. Cal, of course, made a great thumbnail for our episode this week based on it. But yes, just it's so simple. It's just the red circle on the black background and the two saloon doors in there, just picture perfect, and sets the mood immediately. So great stuff there. If we didn't mention it,
good point. All right, Liam. Well, let's total up our final scores, and adding everything up, including my extra bonus point, I end up with a very strong 34 out of 40 for this week's episode. What about you?
That's right. So and I also ended up with the exact same final score of 34 out of 40. I thought we were going to be a little different this week, but the bonus point assured that we are in full agreement again this week here. But as we talk about rewatchability, it's funny because this episode technically is very much a one-off. It does have a returning villain. And as we chatted about, Jonah Hex returns, but it's a younger Jonah Hex.
There's no references that we're aware of.
Right. I don't even think Bruce Wayne doesn't even acknowledge that he's heard of Jonah Hex in that episode, despite them interacting. So it's hard to say you have to watch this. It's so integral to the DCAU, you have to watch it, or even that it's that integral to to this series or to the Ra's al Ghul character or any of that. But I can't bring my heart to say that it's a skip in any way, because it's just so darn fun and so out of the box. I feel like this gets a thumbs up, as we've just spent, the last hour or so talking, just the complete out of the box nature of it. It's so unique. Yeah, I think it's, even though it's not a plot driven, it's not an episode that drives the overall plot of the series or the universe or whatever, but it's so unique. There is no episode like this, really. There is no other episode like this in the DCAU.
Agreed.
We see allusions to the Old West, or we might see a cowboy aesthetic pop up here and there, vigilantes in Justice League Unlimited and whatever, but there's nothing like this episode anywhere else in the DCAU. So I think for that reason alone, you gotta watch or rewatch, as we say. It's about rewatchability. I think you gotta watch this one.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it at least gets one thumb up. Ra's al Ghul, I think you could argue it's a 2 thumb upper, because as you mentioned, you could miss this episode and it wouldn't affect Ra's next appearance, but it does create an interesting dynamic, I think, for Ra's. It adds a little bit more to the story of who he is. Again, I think it's sneakily a a showcase in his ability to manipulate people
Right.
through dialogue, through his storytelling and all of that. But regardless, yeah, I would recommend this. I would say if somebody's saying, hey, for this last little run of episodes, I would certainly recommend this over I don't know, the Terrible Trio. Like we already talked about that episode. That's probably a bad example. I would recommend this over. I think I would recommend this over last week's episode. Like, hey, I only have 22 minutes. Which one should I watch? Watch Showdown. It's interesting. It's different. Especially if you're looking for just fun, 22 minutes of fun also. So yeah, I'm going to step out of the box just like this episode did, and I'll give 2 thumbs up for this one also as far as rewatchability is concerned.
Totally agree there.
All right, Liam, let's begin to wrap things up. Thank you once again to our special guest correspondent, Kevin Altieri, for donating his time this week and coming on the program and chatting with us. As we mentioned, always good to have him on the podcast. Don't forget, if you would like to support the podcast, there are multiple ways to do so. We'll discuss a few of those right now. First and most popular is leaving a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. We are on Apple and Spotify and all the other ancillary podcast apps that pick up our feed, but Apple and Spotify are the most popular, it seems, these days. And Apple allows you to leave a little blurb about the podcast when you leave a review. So if you do leave a review on Apple, we're checking those reviews every single week. There was not a new one this week at the time of recording. So no gift ski to give away this week. But if you do leave a 5-star review and a little blurb about what you like about the podcast and you live within the continental United States, we have a little thank you gift to send out to you. So if that's you, if you haven't left a review before, stop what you're doing right now and leave a review. If you have left a review before, guess what? You're still eligible. You can leave multiple reviews for the same podcast. I don't know why that's a thing, but you can do that. So leave another one and we'll send you another gift. If we've already gotten one, or even if you've done it a couple of years ago, you can leave another review later on. So certainly do so. You can also interact if you're listening on Spotify with our poll of the week and our question of the week. Those are Spotify exclusives as a Spotify podcast. Liam, folks can also support us by following us on social media at DCAU Review, both on Instagram and Twitter. As we mentioned when we were talking with Kevin, follow him at Altieri Arts. Slide into his DMs and get a commission if you're in the market for something from one of the creators of this amazing series. So if you're looking for some artwork and you're looking to get something commissioned, Kevin did mention his commissions are open. So get in contact with him if that's something you're interested in. Don't forget also, you can support our podcast directly. If you want to check out the show notes, there is a direct link to support us financially by myself and Liam. A cup of coffee, something to keep us awake when we are trying to come up with ideas for things to podcast about, or just editing the podcast, as Liam mentioned in the past. That always helps. So you can also get a piece of merchandise from our shop. That link is also in the show notes. Check that out. I'm sure there's going to be lots of Black Friday sales coming up here in the not too distant future. Liam, speaking of Black Friday, next week here in America is going to be the Thanksgiving holiday. So we're giving ourselves good old-fashioned holiday from our standard fare here on the podcast. So no new standard episode this week. But guess what? It's the season of giving. So that means we're still going to have a podcast next week. We're not leaving people empty-handed. In fact, we might even be so generous as to give 2 podcasts in a single weekend. Who could even fathom such an idea? Let's chat about what we'll be doing next weekend rather than dropping our standard fare here as we take a break from our DCAU content for the next week.
That's right. So first and foremost, we will have our now yearly tradition, which is we drop a bonus episode every Black Friday, and we try to make it somewhat themed to the occasion, the biggest shopping holiday of the year. And this year, I think we'll be focusing on As we've been talking about here and there, the DC Direct / DC Collectibles Batman the Animated Series line has been somewhat resurrected by McFarlane, as they now have the DC license. And not only are we getting repaints and reissues of some of the older figures, but we're even getting new figures like the Condiment King Build-A-Figure, which recently came out. So with that in mind, with hope once again on the horizon for new DC Direct Batman the Animated Series figures, we thought we would send Santa Todd our wish list for characters from Batman the Animated Series and the new Batman Adventures that we would just love to see in this line before all is said and done, and that will be our Black Friday bonus. And then, as you mentioned, Cal, it's been a long time coming. We alluded to it on Twitter and I think other places. We always promised that we were going to do it. We didn't really know when, but we do still owe all of our listeners a review of the final issue of Batman: The Adventures Continue Season 3. Speaking of Ra's al Ghul, and we're going to try to get that recorded next week and drop that probably some other part over either Saturday or sometime that weekend. We're gonna drop it. I don't want to commit us to any hard dates with the holidays. It's
hard to say goodbye to Batman: The Adventures Continue. We don't want to do it. That's why we've been putting it off.
It's true. We weren't quite ready to say goodbye, but we're going to try to get that done and try to get that put out sometime over that weekend as well. So at least one, but hopefully 2 bonus episodes coming at you next weekend to make up for the fact that we are taking a week off from our regular reviews. So
we're taking a week off to give 2 bonus episodes.
We're working twice as hard despite not doing our regular episode, but hey. But well, hopefully, if we're not too verbose, the 2 bonus episodes will about equal the runtime of one of our regular episodes. That's what I'm hoping for.
That's right. By the way, spoiler alert, I'm putting Ra's al Ghul and spats on one of my I might change it before that. But that's in the consideration. Ra's al Ghul, top hat and monocle, removable monocle. That's on the list of ones from time. And we'll see. Can't wait to drop those episodes, Liam, as we come up here on a very exciting holiday week here in the States. But until then, I'm Cal. And I'm Liam. And we will talk to you on the next bonus episodes of the DCAU review.
Bye-bye.
Merry Thanksgiving.